Hey, most brands think pricing is simple. You set a price, you run a discount, and then you hopefully watch your conversion move up and get better. But pricing is never just a number. And so today I have a special guest, Nabeel Siddiqi, and we're going to talk all about pricing and specifically what enterprise pricing knows that your e-commerce store doesn't. So Nabeel, welcome to Beyond the Cart. We are excited to have you on the show, man, and talk about a very important piece of the e-commerce puzzle, and that is how much do you charge for your products?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So really quickly about myself, my background is I'm originally a consultant. I was doing AI pricing and AI applications really for all business problems for a while. Previously, I was at BCG doing pricing for the Fortune 500. And a buddy of mine actually came to me at a small D2C e-commerce shop and asked about pricing, and I was like, yeah, I mean, sure, I know this inside out, right? And I realized that enterprise world is very, very different than D2C. The kind of tools that exist are very different, and everything else. So that's kind of how all of this happened. But yeah,
That's
I look
cool.
forward to a conversation.
Awesome. How long have you been sort of in, I guess, the pricing component of things? Like, and how did you get it? That seems like it's very niche. It's not something you wake up and be like, yeah, I think I'm going to become an expert in pricing.
Yeah, this definitely wasn't my childhood dream. It was more of a fireman or something. But yeah, I think pricing was something I kind of fell into over time. I think the first project I did was like in 2012 or something. And
Nice.
that was, the general kind of high level pricing strategy. Where's you going to position it? How are you thinking about it? Not so much of the nitty gritty mathematics and AI side of things. And then like over time, as AI kind of matured, and when I say AI, I don't mean like the generative AI and LLMs. I mean more predictive AI. There's
Sure.
nowadays
There's a
people are thinking
difference.
about it differently, but yeah, so like the predictive AI kind of matured over time, and with that the pricing function began, and it is niche, but it's an impactful area.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's dive in. And so one of the things we want to talk about is this important question, right? So a customer pays full price on Monday, right? And he gets a 30% coupon code on Friday. Like, what do we do? Like, what does that do to trust? How does that, how do we manage that from an ecom perspective?
Yeah, I think so. To take a step back, actually, I think the reason pricing is difficult is that you're trying to do two things at once with pricing, right? You've got your profit, right? Like your price minus your
Mhm.
cost is your profit. We all understand that.
Right.
And then you also have the perception side.
Yeah.
And so when a customer sees, think about it, like a $20 t-shirt versus a $80 t-shirt, just with the price, you have an idea of what that means, right?
Sure.
And so you're trying to do these two things, perception and profit, at the same time, and they're often in tension. And when this tension becomes, I mean, and it's a problem, right? You have to balance it. So if you think, like, to make this a little bit more concrete, if you think about like the pure perception shop, right? They're the folks that
Mhm.
never change price. They never do a discount. They've
Right.
got great brand equity, but they don't really know what the market can handle and is willing to pay. They don't really they leave a lot of margin on the table. They'll usually have like inventory that's not moving. They'll get like stuck inventory and stuff, unless they're a breakout success or something. But the vast majority
Right.
that doesn't happen. Um, and then on the other side, you've got the pure profit folks. And oh, sorry,
Yep.
one more thing on the perception side is usually these are like the founders. Like in the D2C space, this is like the founder whose baby is this e-commerce company that they've blood, sweat, and tears that they've spent to build it, and they don't want anything to hurt it, right?
Right.
And then on the other side, you've got the profit folks, right? That are the pure profit plays. They're doing a lot of discounts. They usually make a decent amount of money in the short run, but in the long run,
Mhm.
they're giving up, brand equity and all sort of stuff. And again, these are usually employees, and not to knock employees or anything, but that's just the way their incentive structure is set up, right? It's about,
Yep.
this year you made this much money, and so therefore they're trying to make that money and make those revenue numbers work. So yeah.
100%. How should brands then think about sort of that pricing fairness or perception? Uh,
Yeah.
the dichotomy. Like how do you determine where you're going to fit in that spectrum?
Yeah, no, agreed. I think fairness, the big thing about fairness is that like you really need to look at it from your customer's side, from your customer's perspective, right? So a great example is like your surge pricing and ride sharing apps, right? Like everybody
Sure.
universally gets it, right?
Right. 100%.
Too, right? It's annoying as a customer. You're expecting to pay whatever $30 for a trip, and it's like
Yep.
80. And so what what do you do? But if you take a step back and look at it from like a kind of like a market lens, what's
Mhm.
happening is that you've got, at the certain point in time and place, you've got like 50 riders and maybe 10 cars. So one thing that Uber and Lyft and all these guys can do is simply charge the normal price, and then it's first come first serve, and then the rest
Mhm.
40 people don't have a ride at all. Um,
Yep.
so the alternative is you raise prices, and so if somebody who, I don't know, needs to make it to the hospital or needs to make a flight or something, they're willing to pay that extra amount, and everybody else can kind of wait. Now, they run into a problem, and we can talk about this more detail, but like it's that the transparency isn't there. So people
Yeah.
just think that this price is jacked up, and they're scamming me or whatever. And so that is where pricing can really become problematic. But I think the big takeaway is that like fairness is in your customer's mind, and they don't care about your
Mm.
costs and your
Yep.
logic. So really think about it from their perspective and not so much your perspective. But on the other end, don't become, a perception only shop like we just talked about.
Mhm.
Fairness is important, but that doesn't mean I'm not advocating for just frozen prices either, right? So you need to
Sure.
kind of balance it. Um, yeah. So I mean, if you, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go finish
I,
your
I
thought.
I was just gonna say tactically, if you really want to think about, how do you change prices, keeping fairness in mind and everything else. Um, the one thing that if you're not familiar with doing a lot of price changes is that like small moves are usually invisible, right?
Mhm.
So under 5% is a fair threshold. There's actually this thing called the Weber's law, and it sounds all fancy, but it basically means that under a certain threshold, people don't notice prices. Like you may
Yep.
have read in places that like Amazon changes prices a million times a day, and nobody's complaining about surge pricing so much on Amazon.
Sure.
Well, not yet. Maybe they will one day, but and the reason is because they're moving prices at the small level, and that helps
Yep.
you understand what the market can handle. And
Yeah.
so the rule of thumb is, like I said, 5%, but this doesn't really apply to stuff like KVIs. KVIs are key value items or known value items. These are
Mhm.
like your big products that are like really visible.
Mhm.
So think about, like Nike, the first thing comes to mind is shoes. So a
Sure.
shoe are like the specific models are Nike's KVIs. Their socks are not, right? Nobody's like
Right.
comparison shopping Nike socks usually. I mean, I guess
Right.
people aren't, but so I think like at the KVI level, yeah, threshold gets tighter, right? So maybe a two
Sure.
percent change people will notice because you're thinking like milk, you're thinking gas, you're thinking iPhones, like I said,
Mhm.
Nike shoes. So that's where you need to be a little bit more careful. But I mean, I think KVIs are important. To know what your KVI is, another podcast episode. I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
we actually run a workshop at Price Perfect about this, like the first thing that we do, because knowing this will kind of determine the rest of your strategy. Um, but yeah, I think small moves, long story short, small moves are relatively easy to make. If you go to larger moves, you need to start thinking about how do you change your reference point. So you're
Yep.
thinking, like a new package, a new positioning, a new bundle, a new store, a new ingredient, something
Mhm.
around it. Like a really good example of this is car models and phone models. Like every year
Mhm.
or every couple of years, they're coming out with something new, and yeah, the price can change. And people are,
Mhm.
people do complain. Oh, last year's iPhone was this much, and this one's more expensive or whatever. But
Mhm.
the reality is that you're now offering something completely new to them, and so you can kind of make that major price change. But I think, yeah, the big takeaway is just be transparent, right? If you're making large price
Yep.
changes, don't do shrinkflation or something else. Nowadays, people will call you out on it very quickly.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, I love it. Like one example of that is I have a brand that I still own and run. I don't run it day to day, but I still own it on Amazon primarily. And this was
Mhm,
a couple few years back. We're rolling into Q4, and
mhm,
we had never really tested our pricing. And I was like, we should run a good price test and see how much it impacts our conversion rate and our sales. So we ran a split test, right? And what we found was we upped our price by a couple dollars, right? And it had zero impact on our conversion rate. And all we did was actually make more profit per unit than we were making before. And we're like, wow, we're making way more money with zero impact on our conversion rate. We actually just are making more margin. And why didn't we do this before? Because we just didn't know, right? And it was just until you test it,
Yeah.
you don't know.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, there's a really famous study, well, famous amongst us pricing nerds, but there's a famous study that I think McKinsey did that found that a 1% improvement, that doesn't mean an increase, but a 1%
Right.
improvement in pricing results in an 11% impact on profit on average. And that's big, right? And that's
That
basically
is
free
big.
money. I mean, you put a lot of effort into it, into all of the other parts of it, and price is a
Yeah.
multiplier, right? Price times volume is your revenue. So
Price is a
yeah,
massive multiplier. It reminds me of this
yeah,
great quote, big doors swing on little hinges. And
yeah,
pricing is one of the little hinges that really are like, you can really swing profitability. I consider profitability the big door that you're trying to optimize
yeah,
for. And there's very
yeah.
few like inflection points in an e-commerce business that it really can push profitability. Pricing, obviously, one of the major ones for sure.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I think that's a great quote. I think we normally also track a lot of other metrics,
Mhm.
not just profit, but like for example, we'll track ROAS, right? Because
For sure.
what you find is that if your pricing is not dialed in, then your return on your ad spend isn't all that great. Your conversions are affected, and then we
For
also
sure.
track stuff like overstock and understock, right?
Yep.
Because again, you're clearing out inventory if you're properly priced, and you're also, I mean, hopefully ordering stock properly, and so you can make sure that you're not stocked out as well. But yeah, I mean, pricing just affects so much of the business that it's
I
I
love
don't know,
that.
stupid not to
No,
be
it's, yeah, I mean, you
optimizing
have to.
it.
You have to be
Yeah,
optimizing it, right? 100%.
yeah.
How do enterprise companies manage price consistency across customer segments sort of without damaging trust or that perception? Like, how does enterprise treat it maybe differently than SMB?
I mean, so well, the way the enterprise does it is not something SMB and DTC can do. They just
That's a
have
good
hundreds
point.
of people doing it.
Right.
They
That's true.
literally, I
That's
mean,
true.
there's so many companies, so many clients that I've had over the years that have like 1,000 odd people in the pricing department, right? And here, this
Just
is, and
crunching numbers.
this is the other thing. Yeah, they're just crunching numbers. There's literally a person per kind of like product group is usually what it
Yeah.
is. And and that's all they do. They just look at these 20, 50 products. They're tracking, and again, they're figuring out what the KVIs are, what are the non-KVIs. They're figuring out how to treat each of them. They're tracking all the customers and competitors and how are customers reacting, and they're running surveys. Like there's all this huge amount of stuff. I mean, a lot of that you can't really do in SMB. It's just cost
Mhm.
prohibitive. And not only that, it's not worth that effort, because the impact that'll have on let's say you're, I don't know, making 10 million a year in revenue. The impact it'll have is just not enough for you to be putting that kind of effort in. I mean, heck,
Yeah,
if you can hire 200 people to run your pricing department, go for it. But if you
for sure.
can't, you need to take some shortcuts. Um,
Which sounds like a really cool AI tool that someone on this podcast may have actually developed, not me.
Um, yeah, yeah. So I think yeah. To continue the story that I was just talking about at the beginning. So when I started looking at the DT space, like I you know about it, you're a customer, whatever. You're not in the kind of back when that buddy of mine came up to me asking for help, and I felt, I mean, I'll be honest. I was a little arrogant. I was like, yeah, of course I know this. I've been doing this for a
Sure.
decade, and when you go in, you realize that the tools that exist out there are, I mean, I don't want to knock them. And they're all people that are entrepreneurs working hard and all, but they're really basic, and it's by
Yeah.
design, and by necessity, I should say, not design. In the sense that like there's just not that much education, right? Like if I were
Mhm.
to go create a tool that helped you figure out your KVI, non-KVI, and charge $30 a month, people just wouldn't know to use it. because
Sure.
they don't have that background and understanding. And we actually
Mhm.
launched originally as a we made it all sophisticated, and we were using all like cutting edge techniques of AI and everything, and we launched as a software only. And we quickly realized that folks are coming in, they don't know how to use it. They're, you see the
Mhm.
kind of playbacks, and you see them kind of clicking around, and they don't, the interface is really simple. We work really hard on making the interface simple, but there's just a lot of these things. Like, how do you, like, for example, one thing that you can do is you can choose whether at a product level, whether you want to optimize for revenue or whether you want to optimize for profit. And people
Yep.
are like, how is where do I begin? How do I even know what to
Right.
do here?
Yeah.
And I took it for granted because that was the world I lived in. I'm the
Sure.
fish and this is water. So,
Mhm.
but we added a lot of workshops and things around it to help kind of not only help people use the tool, but also kind of learn how to do this and improve their pricing capabilities. But yeah,
Ah, I love that. I think that that's awesome, and that is exactly what is required. I think there has to be more sort of education
yeah.
and tools built around pricing for,
Mhm.
the SMB operator. So, one other thing that you mentioned is
Mhm.
pull forward demand and using your pricing to do that. And so explain pull forward demand sort of in simple terms is an e-commerce
Yeah.
operator would sort of like, that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. Um, so I think one thing really quickly before we get into it is that there are two types of discounts, right? And
Mhm,
as a customer, they kind of look the same. You don't really think too much about it, but as an operator, you really need to be thinking about them separately. There's promotional discounts, which is for like the objective is increasing revenue, and then there's markdowns, which is for the objective is for clearing inventory.
mhm.
If you're not in like apparel or something, usually you don't do like a clearance or a markdown,
Sure.
but you should really be thinking about these like as completely separate beasts. Forget the fact that they're both discounts. But yeah, when you're talking about pull forward demand, you're usually talking about promotional, but it does apply a little bit to markdowns. But let's just take the promotional lens. Okay, so essentially what happens in pull forward is, and not just pull forward, but really in a lot of other kind of, there's a couple of different hidden things when you're trying to do a promotional discount, right? Pull
Mhm,
forward demand is, I think it's probably best understood with an example. Let's say you're selling something like toilet paper, right? And your demand is, one roll a month for the sake of simplicity. And you run like a buy one, get one free offer, right? And then a
mhm,
buy one, get one free offer, people load up on it. And so traditionally they would have, or normally they would have purchased 12 rolls over the year at full price.
mhm,
And you give this offer, and so they load up and they buy all 12 rolls now. They've paid you only $6 or $6, six rolls worth of kind of revenue,
mhm.
but they pick up their whole demand. So what has happened in that scenario is that they've really pulled forward the demand that they would have had throughout the year. And
Yeah.
so essentially your revenue looks like it goes up, and like in the short run it looks amazing, this promotion was a success, but in the long run you've actually, not only have you reduced your overall annual revenue, you've also taught your customer what we were talking about earlier,
Mhm.
that you should just wait for a promotion.
Yeah.
And so and the thing about this is that's so kind of insidious is the fact that it is not on a dashboard. Like, you can't
Yeah.
put on a dashboard that you didn't have an event, So that's kind of why a lot of folks miss it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's 100%. Like, well, how do discounts then train customers to delay purchases, right? Because you either incentivize a purchase, to your point, earlier than maybe it would have been normally within the buying cycle,
Yeah.
or you
Yeah.
delay purchase because you're like, hey, you know what? Black Friday is coming up and
Yeah.
I'm not going to buy anything until I see those 60% discounts rolling in my inbox.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of it is, you think about it. I don't know if you've played any kind of competitive sport. You basically fake out, fake them out.
Right.
You have to kind of change things up. you have to not only, I mean, so you've got two different options, right? You can
Mhm.
take the strategy of, we're going to be very consistent, and every year we give a 20% discount or some minimal discount on Black Friday just to kind of keep up with everybody else, and not to annoy customers. And then we just don't do anything else the rest of the year. That's a very kind of disciplined approach. And it works in certain verticals, right? So if you
Mhm.
are in a vertical where people are like, I don't know, like something like cosmetics, where there's a regular repurchase rate and people are looking to repurchase, and they usually need it now-ish. They can't wait 2 months or whatever, 3 months to wait for the kind of stocking up. And then you also have a certain expiry date, right? So in
Yep.
those kind of scenarios, don't worry about it. You'll be fine. But in other verticals, it's, it is hard, right? It's difficult.
Yeah.
And I think the most difficulty that I've seen is like, we've got a client that does kind of outdoors stuff like tents and fishing rods and
Mhm.
all that kind of stuff. And because of the fact that it's a hobby application, people look and they kind of comparison shop.
Right.
And then usually you don't have, because if you know you're going to go camping or hiking or something, you're going to buy it ahead of time if you can. Like if it's a regular thing, if it's
Sure.
just, a random one off, that's different. But then those are not the customers that are really great customers anyway, because their customer lifetime
Yeah.
value is not that great. And so, for them, it's harder. It's definitely harder. You have to kind of keep your customers a little bit guessing. There was a trend in the middle, I don't know if you remember, about flash sales that became a big thing.
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
And that was kind of that, right? Like keep your
Yeah.
customers on your toes and keep them engaged and keep them involved. And that helps. That helps a lot.
There were
In making sure that it's,
whole brands built around it, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
that was their entire deal,
yeah.
was
And
all
I think,
flash sales.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I think don't be scared. I mean, I don't want to like scare people off discounts. I think the way
Mhm.
to think about them is that if your discount is kind of strategic in the sense that it's looking to capture a different kind of segment that you wouldn't be able to access normally, right? Like in that scenario, do a discount, right? Grab those
Yeah.
customers. The one thing I would caution is that be very careful, or I shouldn't say be careful. Track the customer lifetime value or the repurchase rate or the average order value and whatnot of customers that you acquired from like a discounted kind of offer versus
Mhm.
customers that you acquired like paying full price. Just track that. That'll give you an understanding of like, is this like a completely different segment, or is this just a normal
Mhm.
customer that has great customer lifetime value, and they just happen to kind of enter our customer list by just via discount. So that is an important thing to track, because that gives you an understanding of like
Mhm.
expectations and what kind of revenue you're going to get.
Yeah, no, I think the one sort of flash sale platform that I was kind of thinking about here in Seattle was Zulily, right? Like they
Mhm,
went
mhm.
through it and they had
Yeah.
this big ramp up, and then, they have got to go through a couple of restructuring episodes, right? Because, it's like it goes out of phase and
Mhm.
starts to fade. It's hard to maintain that, uh, because you're constantly sort of on like this flash sale roller coaster, and you're not running them, and then you don't have that. Your mechanism goes away, and you're out of luck.
Yeah, I mean, it needs to be part of like a portfolio, right? Like I think the lesson
Sure.
from all these companies is that it's a tool in your tool belt. If
Yeah.
if all you get is the screwdriver, then you're
Yeah.
going to run out of screws eventually.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
um, yeah.
Yeah. 100%. What are some warning signs that maybe brands promotions are maybe even creating like fake growth? I mean, it's fake,
Yeah.
but it's like, oh, I like my dashboards look great, and because I ran this promotion, so I just got to keep running it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think like an easy gut check is that if I were to say that you can't run promotions for the next 90 days, if that puts you into a panic, then
That's
there's a
your litmus
pretty good
test.
chance. Yeah, I mean, I mean, like we're right now in May, so
Yeah.
I mean, assuming this is not like some big sale season that's tomorrow, right?
Sure.
Like if
Sure.
this is
Sure.
like the Black Friday of your vertical.
Yeah.
That ignoring that, like otherwise, if that puts you in a panic, then it's a problem. It's a pretty good chance it's a problem. I think in general, like more tactically, look at the percent of revenue that's coming from discounted orders versus like normal
Hmm.
orders. And like I was talking about earlier, right? Look at your repeat purchase rate and your average
Yeah.
order value and stuff of discount card customers versus not,
Hmm.
and see what's happening. Like you see this in like a lot of these, I wouldn't call them, I guess, dying enterprises, right? Like a
Hmm.
larger enterprises, retailers that are just having a tough time. You see that often, right? Like they'll just be running discount after disc promotion, and
Hmm.
they're clearing everything, and it's like going out of business sale, and then they're just continually going out of business for like 10 years.
Like every month.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so what's happening? I mean, like I've seen behind the curtain, if you will. Um, and what ends up happening is that like this comes back down to what I was saying earlier. These are, for unfortunately, they're employees that are being kind of driven by the market, by the stakeholders to
Hmm.
say, we need to sell X amount this quarter, and they're hitting the numbers because they have to,
Hmm.
but it's just completely deteriorating their brand value and brand equity over time. And it hits numbers right now, but it's a cost that you'll pay long term.
Yeah,
So if you're
for
if you're
sure.
if you're an employee, I guess this is a good hack. But
Right.
as somebody who's looking for a more longer term value for the company, then yeah, be careful there.
I think you nailed it too. I think that repeat purchase rate, understanding what's promotionally driven versus non-promotional sales really allows you to sort of measure whether or not you've created incremental demand or you've just shifted some of that sales demand from later in the buying cycle to earlier, right? And I think that, to me, that's sort of like the big takeaway from sort of this pull forward demand conversation is like, just be mindful, like be thinking about where your sales are coming from and how you want to be positioning that and use the right tool in the toolbox
Yeah.
to do it, right? Because there are more than just slash the price discount, right? And I think that's a good takeaway.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think just to add to that, one thing like of the tools, like you're saying, one thing that a lot of folks I feel in the D2C space don't really leverage is bundles.
Mhm. Yeah,
And bundles
sure.
are, I mean, of course, there's certain verticals that you just can't use bundles, right? But
Right.
if you're selling, I don't know, cameras, right, and you don't have the starter bundle or whatever, you're missing out for sure. Like it's not just that. I mean, and this is the other thing. Like I've talked to some folks that are like, oh yeah, but bundles are, I never purchase bundles, so you know what. But the thing is that a bundle is not just a bundle of products. It's also
Mhm.
a curation by an expert, right? And so if I'm coming in and I'm a beginner, I don't know, want to be a photographer or something, I want that camera bundle because it just
Mhm.
saves me a lot of trouble and thinking and whatnot.
Sure.
And hey, it's at a discount, and I need a memory card and a case and a lens and a filter and whatever else, as well. And so, and then bundles are really cheap to test, right? You just throw together a bunch of
Mhm.
products, and you put them on, and it doesn't really cost you all that much to do bundles. So just be testing bundles and stuff all the time. It makes a huge difference to your AOV, and it can really move the needle on a lot of things.
I love it. I I totally 100% agree with you. I think also one thing that you advocate for when it comes to pricing is to think about it as sort of a predictive system and not just a number. So price, talk to us a little bit about price as a system and not just like, hey, this is just a dollar attached to the product.
Yeah. I think we've kind of touched on the fact that enterprise is a very different ballgame than
Yes.
D2C.
Yes.
And so there are a lot of things you can't really take from enterprise to D2C. But one thing that enterprise, and sorry, when I say enterprise, I don't mean we talked about dying enterprise. I mean the enterprises that are like doing well and that
Sure. Sure.
treat
Sure.
that are good at pricing and really know what they're doing. So the kind of successful enterprises, if you will, The one thing that they do that D2C doesn't is that they treat pricing as a practice, right? Not as
Mhm.
a one-off decision that you just kind of, do and then run off and do everything else. And I get it, right? Like there's so many things to do as an operator running a small e-commerce firm, that it gets hard. And I think tactically, there's probably three things that enterprise does like differently than
Mhm.
D2C does. And I'm using D2C, but you could say D2C SMB, and I'm
Sure.
just shortening it. Um, so I think the first thing is that, and we touched on this a little bit, is that treating KVIs very
Mhm.
differently than non-KVIs. And KVIs, just to make sure everybody still remembers, is kind of like your visible products, right? Like the products that are important that your customer is coming to your website to kind of buy, right? And they're usually the ones that are comparison shopped. So your KVIs are, I think we talked about it earlier, is it's more of a perception play, right? So
Mhm.
you should be looking in KVIs, you should be looking at what your customers are thinking about the price. What are the reviews saying about price? What are your competitors charging for it? Um, and that's also where you're worrying about fairness as well, like again what we talked about earlier. And on your non-KVI side, that's your profit play, right? That's
Mhm.
where you can charge a little bit more. That's where you get a lot of that margin. And I
Mhm.
think enterprise understands this, whereas D2C and SMB will often just apply the same kind of strategy. Like if they're matching, for example, matching to competitors, they're just matching to competitors across the board. Um, and so that is where it really changes. So you need to be treating different products differently based on kind of what is their role in the space. um, the second thing that I would say that enterprise does well that DTC doesn't, is just reviewing prices systematically, right?
Mhm.
Your prices are going to drift, your costs are going to drift, your competitors are moving, your customer mix changes. Like you create a new creative that kills it on TikTok or something, and now all of a sudden you've got a slightly younger demographic that's showing up, and you may be really happy about that, which is great, but what is that impact on price? You need to be thinking about that as well.
Yeah.
And so a price that was right maybe even 6 months ago may be wrong today. And so there's just a lot of stuff that's changing underneath. It's really invisible, and so people don't really think about it. But yeah,
Mhm.
so check your prices. And when I'm saying check your prices, I mean like look at what are the various metrics, right? Like the big one that I often recommend is look at your margin per SKU over time. So is
Good point.
when you're changing prices, look at that margin, see if it's moving, if it's not moving. Hopefully you're tracking conversion rates. So definitely track conversion rates by segment. And like we talked about, like, discount oriented, discount acquired customers versus not. And I think the final thing is test continuously, right?
Mhm.
Test everything you can, prices, your bundles, your discount depths, loyalty mechanisms, etc. And I think one kind of aside here, when I say testing, A/B testing is what comes to people's mind,
All right.
and I have a lot of problems with A/B testing. So, so there's three things really quickly. First is that again, right? Like A/B test makes a lot of sense for like if you want to test a color on a button or something, right?
Mhm.
But when it comes to prices, because everything's moving so quickly underneath the hood,
Yeah.
by the time you get to significance, especially when you're a smaller shop, you don't have enough data, you don't have enough transactions to
Yeah.
get to significance quickly. But as soon
For
as you
sure.
get to significance, by that point in time, the season's changed, everything's changed, right?
Yeah.
And the second
Yep.
reason is that like when you're a smaller shop, again, you're sending half your customers to the wrong price, and we talked
It's a
about
lot, and that's
perception.
risk. That's a high risk.
It's a huge risk. It's a huge risk,
Yeah.
and
It's
it can
huge
be a
risk.
huge problem. And then the third thing is that like after all that effort and blood, sweat, and tears, you only know what two prices are,
Right.
or like you only know the information about two prices, and there's literally practically an infinite number of prices that you could be testing. So it's yeah, it's really tough. I think what is the right answer is you need to give me a few hours, but I think a quick version is there's this thing called adaptive experimentation. You can go, folks can go Google it and all. it is something that a lot more you're seeing a lot more enterprises using, a lot more folks doing. Um, and it's an active research area, and there's a lot of a lot more information about it. Essentially, what it boils down to is you're using your data a lot more efficiently, right?
Yeah.
Than you do in something like A/B testing. And I mean, A/B testing is like a tool from 2010, right? And if you're using
Right.
it today, then you're
It's
gonna
not
lose.
it's not up with the times, because also too, it's like the pricing system, kind of as you describe it, as it inputs beyond cost and competitor pricing, right? Like
Right.
you mentioned it. You talked about margin, you talked about conversion rate. You can even throw in customer lifetime value, right? Cohort level segmentation value, the brand, the perception of the brand. All of those sort of be factored in as inputs, right? And that's hard to do at an A/B split test. How do you A/B split test 6 different contributing
Yeah.
inputs?
Oh yeah, for sure.
You
It's a
can't.
multivariate problem. So
Yeah.
there are alternatives to A/B. I mean, if you want to get a little bit more sophisticated, there are alternatives called multivariate testing, which allows you to test multiple things. But if you're a small shop, you just don't have the value. You just don't
Bandwidth.
have the numbers to be able to make that happen. And not only that, I mean, you need to have a decent, sophisticated understanding of statistics. And
Right.
frankly, most folks don't. And so how do you make that work? Yeah.
How do you solve for that?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. This is another whole podcast. I think, yeah, like the short version is look up adaptive experimentation. I think the other thing is that you need to be really careful about what you're testing. Um, because like you said, there are a lot of things that you need to test, but some of it you just have to go with gut, right? Don't
Yeah.
price by gut, but some things you don't have the option, right? And I think that's the
Yeah.
biggest part. That was like when I was in the beginning when I was talking about that buddy of mine. Like that's what I realized, that like D2C competes directly with all the, like, I mean, your customer can go to Amazon, your customer can go to your website. Like you're
Yeah.
directly competing. You're not like the mom and pop shop of old that's like in the neighborhood and like the Walmart is out of town. Like there is a fundamental benefit of being right next door to your
Mhm.
customer. You don't have that advantage anymore, right?
Sure.
In e-commerce, you're directly competing, and at the same time the folks that you're competing against are so much more sophisticated than you. And so it's just, yeah, well, when I first kind of really understood the D2C kind of landscape, it was yeah, it was jarring. So
Yeah,
it's
it's
definitely an
definitely
uphill battle.
a different beast. How does segmentation fit into pricing? How do you think about customer segmentation, without sort of making customers maybe feel that unfair treatment approach? Like, do you treat VIP customers differently? Do you treat
Yeah.
subscription or recurring repeat customers differently? Like, how does that play into it from your perspective?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you really think about it, a loyalty program is the ultimate segmentation strategy, right? Because you're
It is.
saying that you're a loyal customer, so therefore here's a discount, here's a special
Mhm.
offer. And excuse me, customers or as consumers, we're all okay more or less with a loyalty program. If a loyal customer gets a discount,
Mhm.
nobody's crying foul. And
Mhm.
so that is something that's okay. I mean, you really think about it, price discrimination, to, kind of the broader topic. We give discounts to seniors, we give discounts, children fly free. And like, nobody's saying,
Mhm.
why is that senior getting a discount? It's
Why are
okay.
those
We're fine with that.
veterans getting a
Yeah,
discount? Happy Memorial Day,
exactly.
by the way.
Exactly. Yeah. Happy Memorial Day. So I mean, so that kind of factors in. So there's certain price discrimination that we're absolutely fine
Right.
with.
Yeah.
And so that is kind of the space where you need to be looking at and thinking about, to kind of inspire you, if you will. Tactically, I think like I said, the loyalty is an easy one.
Mhm.
Direct promotions, right? So like you create like in Shopify, right? You create a new coupon code, and you just have that code, and that code is sent to your
Mhm.
top 5-10% customers. that's a great way of kind of segmenting your customers and getting more folks. It's very easy. It's, needs any fancy app or any very elaborate analyses, but it can keep your really well performing customers get even better. And you probably know the 80-20 rule. Your 80% of your revenue is going to come from probably around 20% of your customers. So make sure you treat them right. And
100%.
that's the easy way of segmentation. You can get very, very complex. We've built systems. I'm going to say we like when I was in consulting, built systems that are segmented one, as it's called, where every single person is getting exactly what they need. Again, D2C just doesn't have that kind of data to make that happen. Otherwise, I'll launch an app for that too. Yeah. So,
yeah, you should. Well, we'll wait till AI gets to that point, and then you can launch that AI app.
Well, I mean, I think, yeah, maybe, but I think the reality is that you just don't have that kind of data. Unless you are like pulling, and this is turning into a startup AI podcast, but if you're pulling in data like from third-party sources about a person, then maybe you can kind of do that.
Which does exist.
I think which does exist, yeah. So that can kind of get there, but I mean, I don't know. It feels a little kind of dodgy a bit. Yeah. And so
for sure. I think that it kind of, so you kind of talked a little about tactical for sure. And there was a couple of things that popped up question in my mind. From your perspective and experience, what does a healthy promotional calendar look like? From your, because obviously you're arguing for not being always on the promotional, like blast them every single week with a discount. What does that healthy calendar look like from your perspective?
Yeah. I mean, I think this depends on, as all good answers are, it depends. So it depends a lot on your vertical, right? So certain verticals just are a lot of discounts. Take, for example, like women's apparel, right? Especially in a like a 4-season kind of climate. You're going to have at least 4 discounts in a year that are actually markdowns, as we talked about, right? Like they're clearing the inventory. And so when you see that as a customer, a customer is not really thinking the difference between a promotional discount and a markdown discount. They're just thinking it's a discount. And so you see at least 4 discounts a year. And that is the standard more or less in the industry. Maybe it's 3, again, depending on what kind of what you're positioning it in, et cetera. But so if that is your industry, then you need to be looking at what that standard is and then figure out where you're positioning yourself. So just to say that, do 1 discount a year would be, it's one of those things, right? Like a broken clock is right twice a day. So it'll be right for certain people, but for many folks it won't. So I think that's one thing. The other thing in terms of a kind of a promotion, like a promotional calendar, is really look at your seasons carefully. So I think we started talking about, like, if you're looking at an outdoorsy kind of niche seller that's selling tents and whatnot, you have a season that exists, right? And so don't blindly just go for your big discount, at Black Friday, because maybe Black Friday is not your seasonal time, right?
100%.
It's maybe starting in spring and maybe it's ending, in autumn or whatnot. And so your discounts should be dependent on that. So be very careful about when people are showing up. And, discounts, we talked a little bit about like pull forward demand and all, but like there's discounts, you really need to do the accounting on them. Don't just look at your final revenue number. Look at what are you actually giving up, right? I mean, not only is there the invisible cost of teaching your customers that, your products are not worth paying full price. That's essentially what you're doing. It's a bit blunt, but that's kind of what it is. And at the same time, you're also kind of giving up a lot of revenue. So be careful what you're doing and kind of do that analysis before doing it. I mean, if there's a takeaway, it's just think carefully.
Think carefully, and don't be an A/B split tester. Those are my big takeaways. All right, so I want to pivot a little bit into our rapid fire questions. So I'm just going to ask you a series of questions, and you can just off the top of your head, we'll do like 3, 4, 5. Bigger long-term danger, overpricing or over discounting?
Over discounting. You
For
can
all of the
always
things
roll
that you've
back your
said. And
overpricing. Yeah, you
oh,
can
for
always
sure.
roll back your pricing. Yeah.
And if you want to understand the reason behind that, go back and listen to the beginning of this podcast, because we went into a lot of insight into that. What's one pricing metric every operator should monitor on a weekly basis?
I would say your revenue, or like your customer lifetime value. So the easy one is customer lifetime value. I would say split customer lifetime value to the extent that you can, right?
Nice.
Ideally, you want to go down to customer lifetime value per like creative that people came in from, right? Like that level to the extent, but customer lifetime value is the easy one. And customer lifetime value is hard to calculate. So that's, again, another podcast episode. But,
That is.
yeah.
What is there a brand that you think does pricing exceptionally well? And if so, shout them out.
Oof, that's tough. I would say Coca-Cola, actually, which is not what you think about when you think of pricing. You're thinking of
Yeah.
more bigger, and I would say the reason is because you don't notice their pricing. So
Don't.
it's just done that well that it's cheap enough that everybody has access to it and whatnot. And I mean, as a consumer, you're only seeing Coca-Cola in one market. You start looking at
Right.
Coca-Cola's prices across the world. They do a really good job in a lot of places.
All right, here's one for you. Subscription discounts on subscriptions. Is it a smart retention strategy or is it a margin trap?
If you're looking at it from a acquisition perspective, so like you're saying, first year is 20% off or whatever, and then after that we go to full price, that's okay. That's not too bad. Don't give it on your website, so for everybody that walks in the door. I think that's not smart. But try to segment it and send it to certain customers and other harder to reach or like folks that are kind of switching from your competitor and stuff like that. Doing it as a discount to save customers from churning, that's usually a problem, right? Like you're trying to solve a different business problem with pricing is what you're doing in that scenario, right? Like it's a problem of positioning, it's a problem of product, it's a problem of something else that you're trying to save with pricing. And sometimes that's all you can do in the short run, but know that that's what you're doing. You're putting a Band-Aid on it.
Love it. All right, last one. If there was one pricing mistake that you could fix across e-commerce, what would it be? If you wave your magic wand and you could fix one pricing mistake, what would that mistake be?
I would say just like the obsession with competitor matching, right? Like I think that's just so insidious. Like you were basically telling your customers that your product has no value compared to your competitor. Like indirectly, that's what you're kind of saying. That's back to the perception idea. And I mean, it's okay in a very niche area, right? Like, so if you are, for example, an electronics store that's selling the same exact model as somebody else, fine, I get it. But if you have a different, even if you're selling the exact same product, it's sourced from the same manufacturer, but you have your brand on it, you can charge a different price because that's what your own brand value is, and all sorts of stuff. So like that is one thing that just it frustrates me to no end when I see that, because you're just giving away so much. Shooting yourself in the foot.
Dude, this is such a great conversation. I really appreciate it. I love it. How can people get connected with you and talk more about pricing?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way. If you want to chat with me, PricePerfect.ai is our product. Yeah, go there, get a demo. You'll probably get me at this point in time, or you may get one of my team members, but mostly me. Yeah, that's the easy way.
Tell us, take 30, 45 more seconds, talk to a little bit about the app and the tool for
Yeah,
PricePerfect.
so so PricePerfect is a SaaS plus services. I think I mentioned it. We started off as a software. People don't get it, which I didn't understand. Again, I was blind to it. And so we have services. We have Like, for example, we do a workshop. One of the first things that we do is a pricing workshop, which is like a 4-hour thing where we're using our customers, clients' data to kind of figure out what are your KVIs, and then, okay, how are you thinking about them, and where should you position it, and all of that stuff. And then we have a separate like training where like, okay, now you know what to do. Like, let's talk about how to do it, and how to do it in the app. And so it's an app that right now connects primarily to Shopify. It also connects to custom shops if you have like your own custom kind of implementation. But Shopify, you will get a far better service on Shopify just because it's easier to integrate, frankly. But yeah, I mean that's really the long and short of it. If you're interested, sign up for a demo and understand all the details. I don't want to take up all the time here.
I'm definitely going to sign up for a demo. I think it's super cool.
All right.
So I want to check it out.
Thank you so much.
Well, this has been awesome, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And if you have any questions on pricing, I mean, definitely hit Nabeel up and on LinkedIn and go get a demo. I'm super curious that pricing is such a huge piece of your e-commerce experience as an operator and your strategy. So definitely want to do that. So thanks everyone for hanging out with us on Beyond the Cart, and we will see you next time. All right, bye.